Hello and welcome back to another episode of EP Talks. This is Andre Wicks, your founder and host, and today we welcome Dr. Roshon Ault Lee, principal from the great state of New York. In this episode, we discuss topics such as faith and motivation in education, evolution of leadership and community impact, building a thriving school culture, communication and conflict resolution, approaching misalignment in vision, and finally, continuous improvement in reflective practice. Sit back, enjoy, and remember, inform, influence, inspire. Hello, everybody. This is your founder and CEO of Everyday Principal and host of EP Talks. And we have the great fortune to have Dr. Roshon Ault Lee coming to us from New York, and she's been a veteran principal there for a number of years, and it's been awesome going through the process of getting the podcast up and going, and the future is looking bright. But first things first, Roshone, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, of course. I always like to give a little credibility to our guests, and so I'm gonna just go off of your LinkedIn profile here. I see that you received a certificate of advanced educational leadership from Harvard.
Yes.
You have a master's of science degree from Fordham University. You have your doctor of education from the Teachers College at Columbia University. You founded your own school that you've been the principal at, I think you said, for 20 years. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. And those of you that have been listening for a while now, you know that every guest brings something special and something unique. And that's something that we pride ourselves on. So, Roshone, you're joining a group of talented and respected individuals on this show.
It's such a privilege. And I just want to thank you, first and foremost, for inviting me to be a part of this experience.
Yeah, of course. So the way this is going to work, our typical format, you all know that the principal life is a busy life. And so we like to keep our sessions, our podcast episodes at 30 minutes or less. We want it to be something that you can listen to on the way to and from work. Most of us, I don't know about you, Roshone, but I rarely take a lunch.
That's so true.
Or it's a lunch on the run. So during the school day usually doesn't work out, but we have a couple conversation starters for you, everybody, and I think that these questions will allow us to tap into the wisdom and expertise of our guests. So, first question, Roshone, you are a veteran educator, and I'm really curious for you to share with our audience what is your motivation to wake up and do this work every day?
Great question. So I want to just start by saying and grounded in this in the fact that I am a woman of faith. I wear that as a banner and I'm grounded in scripture. And one of the scriptures that is one of my life's philosophies comes from Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, much is required. I truly believe that because I am blessed with whether it be certain talents, knowledge, time to really move forward the work in the field of education, that I'm called to be a blessing. And that is one of the reasons why I wake up every day like, okay, what is my assignment for today? Who can I help, whether it be a child, an adult, colleagues within the field and beyond. So that is, being grounded in faith is a huge part of who I am. And I'm motivated each and every day, even though some days as a human, it's like I'm tired. I don't necessarily want to move within the same speed that I might on a daily basis, but I know what I need to do. And being grounded in my faith is a huge part of the motivation.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I know that there's a lot of leaders in the K-12 sector who share that same commitment and dedication to faith, and that faith is the driving force for them as well. I think that, what I also heard you saying is that, faith is like your vision. You have this vision of something that you can't necessarily see and touch, but you know it and you believe it and it drives you. And I know that for me, that has been the case too. This vision of something, this idea of service that's
Yes.
bigger than myself,
Yes.
and that has been the driving force. I'm curious though, just because I know that I'm anticipating this, that you are a person that is continually, evolving. That you have the core of who you are, but you're always striving to, like you said, that every day, the challenge, who you're serving, what's needed of you may be different. So I'm curious how your drive or your motivation has evolved over time. Has it changed? 20 years ago when you were stepping into the role of a founding principal, has that evolved over time?
Yes. I believe that the evolution comes when you ask, has it changed? So let me start there. I continue to be grounded and a woman of faith. What has evolved, and it's even richer and deeper, is when I see, for example, my scholars, we call our scholars student scholars, just last week, several of them came back to speak with the eighth grade, the current eighth graders, about high school, their experience, what they're doing now. Some are in high school now, some are in college. And we had a really great conversation because my alum, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how chatty we might have been in the eighth grade, or my goodness. And, it was so great to see and listen and hear how they have evolved. And I am so encouraged when students return, their parents, I see them in the neighborhood, and they're able to identify something that we have done or they have learned within the school community, and credit the school and our community for being that force in their lives to help them to be successful. So when I think about and look back at, oh my goodness, it's being in a community for 20 years. I even have students who were at the school, some of their children are now attending the school, as well as siblings, cousins, aunts. So it's really great to see. Another piece of this evolution is when I first started out as a principal, I was solely focused on the principalship. I was in my mid 20s. There was a lot coming at me. I was in a building that was phasing out the current school. So there were a lot of chronic absenteeism, truancy, a lot happening within the community. And so my focus was solely on the principalship and trying to really put out fires and get through things. Now that we throw around the term instructional leader, I can truly say that that's where my focus has been over a number of years, because climate and culture is pretty solid and continuing to grow in the school community. And I'm also, as a sitting principal, I get to innovate and as well give my time to opportunities like coaching for a fellowship program. The Great Fellows Program is a fellowship in New York City ran by principals for principals, and I have an opportunity to coach my colleagues. So that is something that I'm grateful for. And it's a part of the evolution where that wasn't my reality years ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. As I was listening to you, the idea of faith came up again. And even if you're not a faithful person in the spiritual sense, it takes faith to be committed to something that you don't necessarily achieve immediate results. And that's kind of the life of an educator in general, whether you're a building principal, assistant principal, counselor, classroom teacher, paraprofessional. You're pouring into the young lives of others. And it's kind of funny to hear you say, your students that have come back and have reflected with you on what it must have been like to have them
Yes,
as students.
yes.
But that is the truth. It really does require faith that this investment that you're putting into young people is going to result in quality human beings.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, speaking of culture, you brought it up at the tail end of your last response, and how you spent your early years really focusing on that. I think that having been at a school for 20 years, I'm sure that there's some unique challenges of being in the same place for a long time, but that also opens the door to a lot of opportunities. And one of those is that when you establish a culture, it's established, right? And even though you may have some transiency with staff coming in and out, the foundation becomes so deep that it's easy to quickly bring people along. In fact, because of the culture you've established, you're probably attracting certain people to your
Yes.
school that know who you are and the kind of operation that you run. So, talk to us a little bit about what are the essentials from a leadership perspective of building a thriving school culture.
Absolutely. Before I speak specifically about the essentials, this past year, I had to what's called in New York City excess 6 staff members due to budgetary constraints. And that was one of the most difficult things that I had to do within my school community. I've never had to do that previously over all of these years. And so the decisions had to be made, and I was able to speak to each individual, and it was just heartbreaking. None of the individuals were happy about it, of course. And the number one thing they said, I don't want to leave SBAM. That's the acronym for my school. And, it meant something really that was near and dear to me. And it's so aligned to school culture because I would think, no one doesn't want to be in a community where school culture is not thriving, where we are not ensuring that we are have the best interests of all stakeholders in mind. So I just wanted to share that. And the essentials, I believe, going back to scriptural references, right? For myself, as the leader of the school, it's important that we remain grounded. And one of the scriptural references that grounds me actually is from James 1:19, where the scripture speaks about being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. In any leadership position, every constituent, whether it be students, parents, guardians, whether you're managing up, it's crucial. Listening and listening deeply is an essential skill that must be put at the forefront. With that, being slow to speak, because we can't. And over the years, these are things that I have practiced and been more intentional about doing over the years. I'm not the same leader that I was last year or even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Every day, I feel like I'm evolving. And when I think about the idea of being slow to anger, just having to remember this is not about me. I don't need to take things personal. It's about thinking what is the focus at hand and how are we going to collectively come up with solutions. Another This is actually when we were remote at the height of COVID, schools closed, we went remotely, so I shifted more of how am I going to engage virtually and connect with my community when we're not seeing each other? And I'm a woman of acronyms. So one of the acronyms that I came up with, which was spirit inspired, is SOAR. And from a leadership perspective, to continue to build that thriving school culture, it's S stands for safety. So it was important for me to ensure that whether it be the intellectual, the physical safety of others, that was at the forefront. Stands for over communicate. So what I translate that to mean is communicating regularly. That is a skill set, whether it be in writing, whether it be verbally, but that ongoing communication is a must. A is accountability. I say to staff all the time, my family is my scholars. I'm going to hold you accountable, and I expect you to hold me accountable for what I say I'm going to do, and then also what you say you're going to do. And R stands for resources, right? So to have a thriving school culture, it's very important to make sure that there are resources that I am, whether it's myself that's going and seeking out resources. And even this year, there's so many staff members who have obtained grants and other things that they brought to the school community because they want us to continue to be successful as a school.
That's the golden ticket right there. If you're taking notes on this episode, roll it back about three or 4 minutes and take notes on that. It can't be underestimated. Now that you're at the point where you're 20 years in, I'm sure that it took years to get to the point where the foundation was crack proof with some of the things that you've just talked about. But because of the foundation around culture and expectations and mutual respect and communication and listening being one of the key aspects of communication that is often overlooked, now you're able to focus on more deeply some of the other instructional pieces that you mentioned. And I can't agree with you more. The art of listening is so underestimated and overlooked. And I appreciate how you didn't leave it just at listening. You added the word deep and deep
Yes,
listening, so much so that, it may take you a moment to actually respond to something. I think that sometimes we get confused about how quickly someone can generate a response or a solution. But if you think about it, that means that they were probably thinking about their thinking while you were talking instead of listening to what you were saying. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah,
exactly.
I think that is so important, so important. So speaking of that, these skills of communication, these skills of discernment, patience, slow to anger, not taking things personally. I love how you said this isn't about you. So don't take it personal, and don't allow yourself to go to that place. But in the event it does, right? Every principal that is listening to this right now is like, that's great, Dr. Ault Lee. That's great, Mr. Wicks. But conflict is real.
It
You're in
is.
an organization where there's hundreds of people that come into, or thousands of people. If you're in a large metro school, and conflict is something that we anticipate, and you should. So, with that,
Absolutely.
what is your approach with a staff member whose actions or choices don't align with your vision and or mission?
Absolutely. So it's very important. I know Stephen Covey, the late Stephen Covey, has a saying, and it's also biblical as well: seek to understand before being understood. And so years ago, my approach might have been a little bit different, where I actually would have probably went straight to, no, this is what we're doing and that's it. But now, over the years, my approach has been different. And part of what I do is lead with curiosity. So having the inquisitive mind, asking questions so that I can fully understand where this is coming from. Because sometimes it might be a misunderstanding or confusion, and I want to make sure that that's cleared up. So some questions that I might ask is, can you share your thought process behind the decision, whether it be that the staff member, whatever the actions or choices were, or how do you see this aligning with our school's mission? And when I ask questions like that, particularly the latter, it encourages the individual or individuals to go back to who we are as a community. And in this way, I can clarify expectations around our mission, around our vision, around our value propositions at the school. I think that's a way to really center what's happening and shed a light on where it removes the person from the problem. Also, it's important to, in thinking about how to approach a staff member who their actions and choices are misaligned, is to, after understanding or trying to listen and hear their perspective, clarify expectations, align to the school's mission and vision. And then we get to the solution oriented mindset, right? So if there is, for example, something that the staff member might need to do his or her perform his or her responsibilities at an optimal level, then I would want to know, what are the resources? What support do you need? How can I guide? And as I offer those things, the conversation doesn't end there. Follow up is essential. And as I follow up, it's important to acknowledge his or her growth, as well as the areas for continued growth. So I think we really have to understand and be humane and think about humanity first before coming to conclusions and drawing conclusions to really try to understand why might someone not be performing or their roles and responsibilities as we would wish as school leaders. And like I said previously, there might be a miscommunication that is surfaced based on this approach.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. And I think that hopefully folks are picking up on what you're saying, because going back to one thing that you said earlier about slow to anger, and I think to take it a step further, just being slow to become emotional
Mhm. Yes.
of any kind,
Yes.
uh, I think that, we, you have to be just discerning in so many different ways as a building leader, even when it comes to celebration. You also don't want to celebrate too quick. You don't want to get, emotional too quick. You don't want to, allow yourself to respond in anger. And I think that what you said about being inquisitive, about seeking to understand, Roshone, you know this. There's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Yes.
And yeah, and the only way that, if you kind of enter into a conversation or a situation that you're trying to mitigate with that idea that there's probably more information, you need more before you're able to make a discerning judgment or decision or solution. But I really love that your approach is solutions oriented, and that you know that you come at it by way of creating a solution that aligns with the foundation that you've built, that aligns with the expectations that you've set. I imagine that you're also the kind of leader that you're not asking, your staff or your students to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself.
Correct.
And so, when you model that, it's a lot easier to fall back on that when it comes to solution making. And then when you do, the person gets to decide, is this the right place for me? Is this the right time? And if it is, then they'll be willing to make the changes. And if it's not, you can help them find the right fit somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned growth in your last response, and this will be our final question. We're already there. We're almost a half an hour in, and so many great things have been said. And I'm sure the response to this will be no different. But when you referenced growth, it made me think back to the top of our conversation when you mentioned and we were talking about evolution. And so you strike me as a person that is committed to a process, a lifelong process of continuous improvement. And so I want you to share with our listeners, what are two or three things that you do to stay on that path of continuous improvement?
Yes. Thank you for that question. We went earlier this year, at the beginning of the school year, my staff, we went to Chelsea Piers actually to the past several years. To begin the school year, we have been going to outside of the school to plan for the upcoming year. And the instructor that was leading us in some community building activities spoke about the word kaizen and its Japanese philosophy for continuous improvement. And I said, wow, that is our focus for the year. We have, it's the narrative of the story of us, the power of we within our school and this year's chapter 20. So we really, especially as a school for applied media, we really are grounded in ensuring that we write the narrative and we dictate the message for our school community. But all that being said, there are three things that come to mind as far as the path to continuous improvement. Again, going back to me as the leader first, right? So I need to engage in reflective practice always, whether I make a decision or whether it's a collective with a team, the entire community, parents, students. I'm always assessing, consistently assessing and using specific information and seeking input from as I reflect. So I think that's number one. Engagement in reflective practice is really key as you ground yourself as a school leader. And because we are not on an island of our own by ourselves, we need to, I believe, foster a culture of collaboration. Going back to, I see as I'm even having this conversation today, I'm seeing the alignment throughout where the school community, there are others involved. They're looking at it through humanity, the perspective of humanity. It's important to foster that type of collaboration and seek input and get feedback from others, right? Based on if this is something that we set forth to do, then and we assess where are we now and getting everyone's input on different things. At some point, it is crucial for leaders to understand you don't need everyone's input all the time, right? You have to discern, and I love when you lifted that word, you have to discern at what time you need input and what times you need to, as a leader, make decisions. And the third is in any sort of continuous improvement, data is essential. So that data analysis using the different data sets to inform and drive decisions and being really specific. And the final thing that I will say that ties in all of those three things, reflective practice, fostering a culture of collaboration, and using data, is years ago, I developed a framework entitled the Price Framework. And this is when we plan things within the school, whether it be big or small, we use the framework. It stands for purpose, relevance, impact, conditions, and evidence. In the frame itself, it allows us to, even before we set out to accomplish something, we are already thinking about what is the impact that we want to achieve and how or what evidence we are going to use to actually measure the success of what we wanted to achieve. So it's critical that when we think about why we're doing something, the why behind it, we think about why it's relevant. We also need to consider when we think about continuous improvement, how are we going to measure what it is we set forth to accomplish?
That's fantastic. Seriously. And you are the queen of acronyms.
I am.
If you haven't been already, I'm going to officially crown you.
Yes, thank you.
As I was listening to you, I was trying to kind of stitch my own red thread through everything that you were saying. And one word kept coming to mind with every example that you shared about how you keep yourself improving and evolving. And that word was feedback. When you think about collaboration, the purpose of collaboration is to give and receive feedback. You talked about assessment. The point of a test isn't just to take the test, it's to learn something.
Yes.
It's to get that feedback. It's to communicate to yourself and to others. Am I meeting standard? Have I improved? Am I getting better? Am I going the direction that I need to go? And no, it sounds like, you have systems in place that are clearly working for you, and you are achieving amazing results. Your students are doing amazing things. One of the tests of your impact is if kids come back. And I love that you shared a story of your students coming back, and not only just to say hi either. You have students coming back and they've reflected. and they're making connections, and now they're out there also making an impact on their community. Well, Roshone, that is a wrap for this session. I'm already looking forward to the next time we have you back on the show. I know that you're going to continue doing great things. But for now, that's it. I know that our listeners are going to benefit from everything that you've had to share today. So thank you again for being a guest on the show. Thank you for listening to EP Talks. EP Talks is the official podcast for Everyday Principal. Everyday Principal is the leading learning management system focused on principal development. Assets within the LMS include EP Talks, the EP Blog, the EP Collaborative, groups and forums on the most relevant topics in K-12 education, EP University, customized courses and programs aligned with your school district's strategic plan, EP Publishing, opportunities to author and write for Everyday Principal, and EP Microlearning, opportunities for bite-sized learning. Each asset within the EP LMS is an opportunity for you to grow and earn continuing education credits or clock hours. Contact us today for more information.